Everyone knows that manga is very male-centered. Most of the characters, creators, and stories center on men and young boys, but there was a genre targeting women that were typically made by women. In the early 80s, only a couple of publishers were creating manga under a specific genre known as shoujo. Around this time for years, women authors decided to stick to shoujo, but it was still very underground. Many of those same young girls turned into young women, and that's when josei was created. It was for new adults and contained more mature content. That doesn't mean that all of them had explicit content, but some of them did. It was well known that josei manga that were specifically targeted towards women were simply too risky to license for English release. Hence why most of the manga that I wanted to recommend or read I couldn't find a translation for. Even though the manga industry is dominated by men, few well-known female authors have found success. These authors finally developed their own artistic style and genre after overcoming discrimination and harsh working conditions. A lot of bias believe that women are incapable of creating manga because it is intended for male audiences. They couldn't have been more wrong. Seeing these mangas, you might be thinking that it's just one in a few. Shoujo and Josei still aren't really for men or for you guys, and that's okay. I just wanted to shed some history and some light on this genre, and I wanted to share some more info about where I get my influences. Given how many Poon edits I have done and how much his writing has inspired my writing, it should be apparent to many of you that I'm a major fan of Inoue Asano, and he is also a fan of Shoujo and Josei. During the time Inoue was writing Goodnight Poon, an interviewer asked him the question everyone wanted to know. With Poon, the main character doesn't have a human form. Was that another one of your challenges to the medium? In Inoue's response, he states, that's right, for example, in shoujo manga you have cases where the art depicts someone as cute, and yet they are unpopular. If you read it while thinking that's just the way it is, then there's no problem. But I do think that's strange. Poon started out from me thinking that way. And so I think the critical viewpoints that Madoka Magica has is also present in Poon. In another interview that was taken in his workspace, the interviewer asked, what's on your bookshelf? And Inoue says, the lineup I have there hasn't changed for a good 10 years. I like manga by Naoki Yamamoto, Kyoko Okazaki, Minotaro Mochizuki, and Kenshiro Nagao. Kyoko Okazaki. Wait a minute, why does that name seem so familiar? For some reason, Kyoko Okazaki's name caught my attention, but I couldn't recall why, until I searched her up and discovered a manga that looked very familiar. It was one of just 2 josei I had ever read without realizing it was josei, a manga genre aimed at women. And it was titled I want to talk a little bit more about josei and some history revolving around it. Lady Comics, aka Josei, debuted in the 1980s. Around this time, many shoujo mangaka became dissatisfied with the constraints placed on the shoujo demographic by publishers. The conventional option was that shoujo manga was only for children. These authors who created shoujo manga were frequently forced to omit certain issues. It makes sense, you have to leave out more mature themes since this genre is centered around young girls. You can't just flat out show sex and violence. Not that every josei is that, but they had to keep it separate. As a result, B-Love was the first manga magazine for women and was released in 1982. Josei were advertised as containing tales that weren't appropriate for shoujo manga and covered significant topics like sex, marriage, domestic violence, discrimination, and sometimes health. And that's where josei comes in. It was used to differentiate between women's manga that were pornography and those that weren't, in order to reduce confusion. Okay, now we can finally talk about this manga. One thing I will say about this manga is that it has a very unsettling feeling to it. The first thing I want to state is the name of this manga, Helter Skelter. If you're a fan of the Beatles, you've probably heard of this name before. And this is how Paul McCartney describes this song. Using the symbol of a helter skelter as a ride from the top to the bottom, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, and this was the fall, the demise. Now, many of you might know this and some of you may not, but there is a very bad reputation for this song. And the reason why is because this song is linked to a very disturbing case.
We have a weird homicide.
In a scene described by one investigator as reminiscent of a weird religious rite, 5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead at the home of Miss Tate and her husband, screen director Roman Polanski. Miss Tate.
Here is a quote from that case, and it comes from a very disturbing man. Helter Skelter is confusion. These are words from Charles Manson. According to Charles Manson, he thought that this Beatles song contained a coded prophecy for an end-of-the-world conflict. This isn't a coincidence. I believe that Kyoko Okazaki did this on purpose. Confusion is spreading quickly. If you fail to see the uncertainty that is rapidly creeping up on you, it is absolute chaos. And that's what we gradually witness in this manga. Confusion and chaos, a roller coaster spiraling down with Riroko. This is all just from the name of the manga. Youth and beauty are not synonymous. Youth is beautiful, but beauty isn't youth. We follow our main character Riroko through her celebrity life and watch her twisted mind at the start of her downfall. She is an icon whose livelihood relies upon her physical image, and she will go to any lengths to meet and preserve the world's beauty standards. As time passes, this is no longer enough. She goes through more and more surgeries, but her time is coming. Beyond just Riroko, Helter Skelter discusses the media and how it shapes the news, how someone can be loved by millions and yet feel so lonely, and whether or not it is because of other people's influences and pressure. It doesn't offer a solution. This manga is a horrible satire on the lengths people will go in order to fit into a category that is dictated by the media's unattainable beauty standards. How long will a magazine cover last? How long is a film supposed to go on for? She continuously changes her appearance and shape in order to fit into the newest, most popular standard that is set and forever changing. Riroko is portrayed in this manga as a terrible person. But was that how she was born? Is that how she truly is? Or is it because she is influenced and pressured by her second mom? She questions herself and her genuine feelings. Many of her questions center on her life decisions. Are her decisions guided by her principles? What about the world's ideals? As the story progresses, we see how the after effects of the plastic surgery begin to manifest. Cosmetic products are like crack. The more you use them, the more you feel the need for them. You start searching for stronger and stronger products. Helter Skelter is a brutally honest analysis of the shallowness of celebrity culture. It's an ugly portrait of a woman so consumed by wealth and beauty that she becomes nothing more than a luxurious facade concealing a rotten core. A beautiful apple that's rotten on the inside and full of bugs. All magazines, beauty product ads, and the extremely attractive people shown in the media are all a part of this wicked business. And the satire story is the conclusion of this enterprise. Models and customers are both destroyed by this awful cycle. No matter how beautiful it is, a rabbit is still a chunk of meat once you skin it. Helter Skelter debuted on June 8, 1995 and ended serialization on March 8, 1996. 2 months later, Kyoko Okazaki was hit by a drunk driver. She is still alive and has received treatment. She had suffered significant brain injuries and was in a coma for months. Even after she recovered consciousness, she needed a breathing machine. Her editors and friends paid a visit to her when she was in the hospital, and they all mentioned her slow recovery in their writings. Despite showing signs of recovery throughout the years, this accident stopped her career. There was an article about Okazaki's closest friends, her old assistant Ano Moyoko and I believe Sakurazawa Erika. They both helped her finish Helter Skelter. And while doing some more research, I found that in 2012, Okazaki was in a wheelchair and she had happened to sneak into a Ozawa Kenji concert. He was an ex-guitarist for Flipper's Guitar. Later on in the year, another event, Sakurazawa saw Okazaki again for the live-action adaptation of Helter Skelter, but she stated on her blog that Okazaki was unable to provide an opinion on the film. She wasn't sure if it was because she was exhausted or because she never regained her speech after the accident. I kept thinking, what a terrible twist of fate. Okazaki's friends described her as energetic, carefree, and cheerful, which is more in line with her personality. Okazaki partied in the club while other artists were concerned about deadlines. So we should be like her. She probably wouldn't want us to be so gloomy. Now I suppose it's time to tell you about the first Josei manga I've ever read and how everything comes around full circle. This was a manga called I will try to keep my composure when talking about this manga.
Doesn't know how to handle a pretty confident woman without feeling insecure or afraid of losing them.
Noko binge eats and has severe depression as a result of her frequent insecurities and the stress of being bullied at work. She continues to eat till she can't recall anything as a coping technique for her despair. Noko's weight becomes uncontrollable, and her binge eating worsens her body image. Noko is now locked in two vicious cycles: overeating and feeling self-conscious about her body. She feels that if she loses weight, everything will be fine, and she blames her problems on her weight. In an attempt to shed weight, she seeks assistance, but things don't go as planned, and she relies on her boyfriend Sato for emotional support. Let's talk about her boyfriend for a second. He is terrified of pretty confident girls, so he encourages and even compels Noko to stay big, despite not being attracted to her, because he believes that she won't leave him if she remains overweight. He thinks that if she becomes skinny and glows up, every man will want her and she will leave him. That's already bad and simply made me not like him at all, but it gets much worse and it goes even deeper into his brain and his thoughts. It's revealed, spoilers by the way, that the reason he continues always returns to Noko, that makes his relationship. I thought his character was and for some reason she just, and he's not even the primary antagonist of this story. The real antagonist is Noko's co-worker, Mayumi. Not only does she belittle Noko for being overweight, but we also learn that she has frequent sex with Sato and even abuses him whenever they see each other. But that's really his fault because he's a loser. It's hinted that her acts are motivated by unhappiness and obsession with wanting to tear down others in order to feel superior. In Clothes Called Fat, it's not a comfortable read. I had no idea what I was getting into when I began reading it. Everyone suffers from insecurities. Therefore, many readers will find this relatable. People have low self-esteem if they are repeatedly told that they are obese, ugly, or otherwise physically disgusting, or if they view themselves in this way. This is what makes Noko so easy to sympathize with, especially when her life goes wrong, dragging her deeper into the pit of uneasiness and dissatisfaction. Her low self-esteem and continual desire for praise from others, particularly her terrible boyfriend, are as devastating and realistic as they are self-destructive. Noko overlooks or ignores the harm she is causing herself in her desperate desire to reduce weight and regain her partner. That's when I started losing sympathy for her. I'm sorry, but I just couldn't bring myself to like her anymore. You are able to pinpoint the story's central idea at its core. Being overweight, thin, attractive, unattractive, self-assured, timid, strong, or weak, none of these traits are fundamentally reasons for happiness or sorrow. The primary takeaway from this manga is that happiness originates inward, and that you will always be unhappy with life if you don't deal with the root of the problem. It's not about her body, really. It's her heart that's fat. This manga was created by none other than Ano Moyoko, Kyoko Okazaki's friend and former assistant. This was so shocking to me. I never thought that I would have so much connection to them. And I'm not saying I am physically connected to them or anything like that. I'm just saying emotionally, because I read their stories years ago and I'm just now finding out that it was them and that they were partners and friends. Like, that's so crazy to me. And speaking of that, there's one more example that I wanted to mention, and it includes a couple mangas. Why these mangas specifically? Because these mangas and series in particular had an impact on a very small, and I mean extremely small, mainstream manga. And that manga happens to be called When I was preparing the script, it was challenging. I can talk and say a million things about Berserk, but I'm finding it difficult to write this. My affection for this series is so intense that I'm really at a loss for words. So I'll just jump into it. Now also, if you don't know anything about Berserk, I suggest you skip this part and watch the rest of the video, and I will try to avoid spoilers, but I think that's impossible. I've always thought that Berserk did a crazy good job on capturing such realistic emotions, which is probably why it's one of my favorite mangas of all time. Whether it's Casca, Guts, or Griffith, they all feel genuine and human. Now I think the best and most accurate display of this was in the Golden Age arc. Guts, the main character, was initially made to feel wanted by Griffith. It's simply a guy who had never felt like he belonged, and Griffith gave him this sense of belonging. That also comes from the fact that he was the first person to validate him and make him feel appreciated. However, this is when the Golden Age arc's pivotal moment occurs. I may be skipping a lot, but I'm just trying to get to the point. Griffith believes that he is a rather powerful person and is well aware that he is admired by everyone. He believes that someone must be more than just a slave to his desire in order to be his friend and a real equal. Obeying his order would make them a follower, a subject, rather than an equal or friend. They must be unwilling to change their lives to suit his goals. Rather than unwavering commitment, friendship is characterized by the willingness to criticize and disagree with one another. During Griffith's talk with the princess, Guts overhears that Griffith only views someone as a friend if they share his dream. Guts thought that he was Griffith's friend. He desired to be deserving of his companionship. This makes Guts rethink his course of action and see the repercussions of mindlessly pursuing someone else's goal. Now he wants to become Griffith's equal, and wants to take charge of his own fate rather than living and dying for someone else's. Guts makes the decision to leave the Hawks in order to discover and follow his own dream. This is where we find out who Griffith really is. He is an adult with the skills of a genius, but the emotional maturity of a child. His maturity earned him respect and fear, but when he makes plans and then has to cope with something unexpected, or when things don't go as he planned, he gets scared, angry, and nervous, like a child. He doesn't know how to deal with these emotions in a healthy way. He suppresses them with logic, and he made himself view Guts as merely a pawn. This is where we see his demise. It was caused by his incapacity to recognize and manage his unusual emotions. Griffith was so focused on realizing his own dream that he forgot, or perhaps disregarded, that other people have dreams as well. This all could have been avoided if Guts told Griffith that he wanted to be his equal. Wasn't this video about women writers and their genre and how it impacted manga? Yeah, it is. In an interview with Kentaro states, "The manga I want to create, however, has aspects to it that can be downright shoujo manga-esque. So I have to strike this balance between delicate drama and Fist of the North Star." The interviewer then says, "I actually have this personal theory that Berserk is really a shoujo manga." And Kentaro replies by saying, "Makes sense to me. Shoujo manga is all about expressing every feeling powerfully, and in that sense, it's not as contrived as a manga for men." I need to repeat that. Kentaro, the man who made Berserk, one of the most manliest mangas ever made, responded to the statement that Berserk is actually a shoujo, and he says, "Makes sense to me," and it's been said many times that Berserk was influenced by shoujo. Oh, man. In all honesty, I kind of just put everything I learned about Josei in this video, and I also wanted to recommend those two mangas because it was honestly a really good read and experience, and I believe that those two mangas are a great introduction to this genre. Not only is this a troubling genre, but it also helps you understand relationships and emotions. Despite being surrounded by clues and hints, I largely ignored Josei stories and never knew that the series I was watching were Josei until I reached adulthood, and many of the hidden meanings flew over my head. This contrasted with seinen. With series like Berserk, Akira, and Vagabond, they provided critical insights into more complex morals and philosophical themes, while Josei addresses similar subjects through drama rather than action. It's not as flashy or as obvious, but it creeps up on you, and you never truly see the meaning, but you definitely feel it. Now, I'm not a saint. I initially opposed the idea of reading Josei and shoujo due to some bias I had, and then I noticed that most women grow up watching and reading male-orientated media because that's the norm. So men are uncomfortable with media aimed at women because they've never had to, or it's outside of what they know. I initially thought that I wasn't the target audience because I didn't see the appeal in this genre, but I was proven wrong. This genre portrays the universal desire to be loved and to love, and establishing one's own identity. I encourage you not to make the same mistake I did, but it's also unfortunate that I have to make this video. Josei could and should be significantly more common both inside and outside of Japan. The stakes and tones of these stories provide realism to characters I previously thought were simply for my entertainment. As someone who loves Berserk, Real, Chainsaw Man, I'm not ashamed to say I loved Blank Canvas, and I loved Peace. I'm not ashamed of that, and you shouldn't either. When I made this video, I realized that the fundamental issues was toxic masculinity and radical feminism. Now, I'm not going to go on a rant about that. I just find it disappointing that I was able to discover a whole bunch of new manga, only to return to those mangas and discover that the majority of them haven't been translated and will never be. I only wanted to read more of Anno Morioka's work. But hey, as long as I can eat, I'll be fine.